Welcome to Intuitive Transformations with your host, Sylvia Henderson, and discover tools, wisdom, and inspiration that will empower you to transform your life. Sylvia is an intuitive life coach and energy healer with a growing practice that is focused on empowering others to be more of who they want to be. For the next hour, join Sylvia and explore and unravel anything in the way of you creating the life that you would love to live on the OMTimes Radio Network.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Intuitive Transformations radio show on OMTimes Radio FM, where you will find tools that you can use to change and transform your life. I'm Sylvia Henderson, your host, and as the announcer said, I'm an energy healer and an intuitive life coach, and I am broadcasting to you live from beautiful Kirkland, Washington, where I live. If you would like to know more about me and the work that I do, please be sure to visit my website at intuitivetransformations.net. That's intuitivetransformations with an S.net. And while you're there visiting my website, please feel free to send me your thoughts about my show. I really appreciate all the gestures of support that I receive from you. And if you have a guest that you'd like to suggest for the show, please feel free to do that as well. And also, while you're on my website, I would really, really appreciate it if you would just take a moment to also like me on Facebook. All of those Facebook likes really do count. I want to send out a great big thank you to everyone who entered the Easy Breezy Prosperity Book Giveaway that was running for the month of February. On behalf of all of my winners, I want to send also a great big thank you to Emmanuel Dagger, the author of Easy Breezy Prosperity, because he supplied all of those beautiful copies that I was able to easily get to those who won in the contest. If you have not yet purchased a copy of this book, then I really do highly encourage you to do so. Emmanuel is a healer and a prosperity guru, and his book is absolutely worth the investment of the cover price, and his book is available at Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, and also on Emmanuel Dagger's website, which is EmmanuelDagger.com, and Dagger is Dager. So today is March 20th, and that marks the very first day of spring and also the spring equinox. And I don't know about you, but I really do love spring. It's one of my favorite seasons because this is when Mother Nature is just brimming and bubbling over with life and colors. And there's this wonderful expectation in the air that summer is very near as well. And here in the Pacific Northwest, spring is when we begin to see evidence of our days actually growing longer, because in the summer we have daylight until 10 o'clock at night, which is really something wonderful. And the falls and the winters here in the Pacific Northwest have much longer nights. So it's really nice to finally flip the switch on that and move into those longer stretches of visible natural light. And speaking of light, today's show is titled Touching Light with Ronelle Wood. And this show, I think you're going to find quite fascinating. It is based on Ronelle's brand new book called Touching Light, How to Free Your Fiber-Optic Fascia. Now, for those of you who don't know it, in addition to everything else that I've learned over the last 20 years, I've been a massage therapist for about 6 years now, I got certified in manual lymphatic drainage. I also taught craniosacral and Chinese medicine to massage students as well. So I was really delighted to have Ronelle's new book come my way, because she and I share the same philosophy that while our bodies that our bodies are designed to heal themselves, but then sometimes when an injury occurs, or when we experience a deep emotional or physical trauma that hasn't been resolved, that the body actually requires some therapeutic assistance to restore it to its healthy balance. And Ronelle has a wealth of knowledge from her personal experience as a Myofascia release therapist and teacher, and she's going to share that with us today. Now, I know for some of you, words like fascia and myofascia release are probably words that you do not get to hear very often or at all. And unless you've actually had some kind of a chronic physical condition and have experienced myofascial release or worked with a massage therapist. But I promise you, by the end of this show, not only will you know what fascia is and myofascial release is, but you will most likely want to find yourself a therapist to have this beautiful therapy done on your own body, because it's a very potent modality, and its ability to facilitate healing and structural restoration with a very light touch is quite profound. So let me tell you a little bit about Ronelle Wood. Ronelle is a writer, she's a public speaker, she's a teacher, and she is a beautiful mentor. She began her career as a speech and language pathologist, and through a series of events in her own personal life, she is now a well-respected authority on fascia and healing. Ronelle has an entirely new approach to physical, emotional, and spiritual health through myofascial release, as well as a process that she created herself called True Body. Now, since 2008, clients have traveled from all over the world to Ronelle's sanctuary in Ojai, California, for her unique combinations of treatments and instructions, which provide the proven results that these clients were looking for. Ronelle has helped clients achieve long-term relief from such ailments as plantar fasciitis, rotator cuff tears, joint pain, knee surgery, back pain and injury, back surgery, hip and knee replacement, pelvic floor disorder, and also fibromyalgia. So if you found yourself in any of those things that I just listed off, then definitely this is a fantastic show for you to stay tuned to and listen to. Ronelle believes that lasting health solutions are simple, even when not always easy, and her clear way of communicating her easy sense of humor leaves her students and her clients with breakthrough information and new learning that works so well for them that they actually use it and they never forget it. And I promise you that neither will you. Ronelle Wood, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for inviting me here.
Oh, I'm just so happy to have you here because this is the good stuff. I love talking about things in the body, and fascia is one of those components of the body that people really are not aware of, and it's a very important contributor to our health and well-being. Holds everything in place. So, Ronelle, I know that today's show is divinely inspired because just this Friday evening, I banged up my funny bone pretty good. And I know, it was terrible. I just rammed it against something. And by Saturday night, my range of motion had decreased so significantly that, I had to take something for it. And in the morning, I could hardly extend and flex my elbow. So I actually ended up in the ER this morning, everyone, because the pain was so excruciating. I just needed to make sure that I hadn't fractured anything. And as it turns out, what I had done was I had actually exacerbated tendinitis, which I didn't even know I had, and some people may know that is tennis elbow. So I'm really excited to talk to you about fascia today, what it is, what it does, and how we can help our bodies to heal better. So Ronelle, can you first describe to those who are listening exactly what fascia is and why it is so important in the body?
Fascia is connective tissue, but there's so much more to it than that. based on recent discoveries, we now can look at fascia in a living person. All we knew about fascia before this was what we studied on cadavers, and it's a completely different consistency when you are viewing it on somebody who has passed away. So one of my heroes, Dr. Jean-Claude Gambarteau, a French hand specialist who did surgery on people's wrists and forearms and hands using fiber optic surgical tools, got agreement from his clients to videotape what he saw while he was in there, and he was magnifying the fascia at 25 times magnification. And then he made a movie that we can all see. It was called Strolling Under the Skin. This was about 6 years ago. And I took excerpts from that movie and made a tiny little YouTube video that's 1 minute and 20 seconds long that explains what fascia is and shows you what it is. And what we discover is the little tubules of fascia are hollow, fluid-filled, and transparent, transmitting light. So the surprise to us was that our fascial fibers are fiber optic. And I don't even have to explain how fiber optics work in terms of transmitting information, because we all watch cable.
Absolutely. It's the speed of light almost.
Exactly.
That is amazing that it's hollow, fluid-filled, transparent, and filled with light. I know when I was in massage school 6 years ago, we didn't have that information because, as you said, just about all of the information medical science had on fascia is based on what they found in cadavers, and that's a completely different animal altogether.
Yes.
So in a moment, we're going to continue this conversation right after the break. Please stay tuned. We'll be back in just a few moments to talk more about fascia.
A conscious lifestyle for a mindful life. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
This is Terry Van Horn, and I want to invite you to join me for my weekly radio show, Healing Light, on OMTimes Radio every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. On Healing Light, we want to bring love, light, and blessings into your world. You can find out more about us at www.healinglightonline.com. Blessings.
Meet me in the marvelous St. Martin for an evolution into self-love and soulful living. Hi, I'm Bernadette Davies, founder of Agape Holistic Retreat in St. Martin and around the globe. We're an all-inclusive retreat in St. Martin and private retreats and around the globe. It's magical. www.agapeholisticretreatsxm.com. Attunement, enhancement, alignment. www.agapeholisticretreatsxm.com. Meet you in St. Martin.
Join Elliot Jolish, the business therapist, each Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern for the Elliot Jolish Hour, as he interviews business experts on your behalf. And you're invited to email your business questions to questions@ecjgroup.com for answers, live, on air every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on the Elliot Jolish Hour. Are you trying to get from point A to point B and need a little advice? Connect with the counselors at OMTimes Advisors. Whether you're looking for a life coach or a spiritual intuitive, the advisors participating at advisors.omtimes.com were carefully chosen based on their gifts, skills, and professionalism. OMTimes Advisors, connecting you with the best advisors in the business. The cutting edge of conscious radio. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
And she is an expert in myofascial release and has developed even her own technique called True Body. Not only does she provide the therapy, she also teaches and provides instruction in California. And before we went to the break, she was talking about a hand specialist, a French hand specialist, who was able to actually videotape the fascia within the body. And it was described as being hollow, fluid-filled, transparent, and filled with light. So this is important for a lot of reasons, Ronelle, because doesn't fascia it's like saran wrap is what we're taught. It wraps around every fiber in your body, every bone, every organ, everything is wrapped in fascia. Is that correct?
Yes. Should I tell you the analogy of the orange? It's such a great illustration.
Please do.
To describe the functional anatomy of fascia, imagine an orange. Without its peel, it still keeps its shape. It's still round and held together by the pith, the white stuff surrounding everything. And we are the same way. Without our skin, we have a superficial layer of fascia just underneath the surface that wraps around everything. You know that you can take a section out of the orange and it has its own container, just as all of our muscles and organs have their own container. And you can also open up that section of orange and see that every tiny little piece of pulp has its own container. And we are just like that, all the way down to muscle spindle and organelle, all the way down to bone. And bone is just mineralized fascia. And the beauty is it's all connected. So if I am working on your body in one area, say your foot, and you get an itchy nose, it's not coincidence or your imagination. It's information about where the fascial lines are connected, where there's drag happening somewhere else in the body. And the body is amazing in its ability to tattletale on itself about where the fascial restrictions are. And when your mind is able to step back from trying to figure it out and be rational and logical and linear, the fascia kind of wakes up and begins to lead you into an unwinding, much like dogs and cats do when they get up from a nap, where you get an irresistible urge to start twisting or pushing or stretching or yawning or making noise or remaining very quiet and still. It is an internal instinct that we all have, but we kind of grew out of it. And I want the world to know just how important that is. Because from the time that we have a medical breakthrough, it usually takes 10 to 15 years before it actually shows up in the world. For instance, doctors have known for 15 years that NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, actually deteriorate fascia in the long term.
Wow.
And yet they still are prescribing it. And if the directive is to first do no harm, fascial release is the place to begin, to loosen the internal straitjacket, is what I call it, that's inside the body, that's compressing you from the inside before going to drastic measures of prescription pain medication or NSAIDs or surgery.
So let's talk about this constriction a little bit, because even something as simple as bumping up against the table can create scar tissue, right? And fascia can be kind of a sticky a substance that when it's injured, it will over repair itself.
Yes, those two things are both true. And so once we've established that it is connective tissue, now we can talk about its protective function. What happens when you get scared or injured is the fascia contracts like a sea anemone. The whole thing, everywhere in your body, contracts inward. And whether it's stepping off a curb funny and being embarrassed, and trying to suck it up and move on from there, or being in a horrible car accident and having that, dear God, we're going to die response in your fascia, you often walk away from one of those events with a freeze response in the fascia. So it contracts and it says, that was a life-threatening situation. We weren't ready for that. We're going to be ready from now on. And it continues to hold in your body. Without knowing that that moment is past, you could be walking around with a lifetime of holding, not just from fear experiences either. From the time you're little and you're being taught to please sit down, please be quiet, please hold still, you are contracting. So because you have very many other things that you have to pay attention to and learn, the habit of holding goes on a background program, like an operating system on a computer, and your fascia is in charge of holding in your throat so you don't talk so loud or tell family secrets or say rude things. And it holds in your arms so you don't slap people or steal other kids' toys. And it holds in your legs so you don't kick people. And most of the time when we're young, we have a lot of opportunity to jump around and spaz out and move in goofy ways and interrupt those clenching patterns. But the older we get, the more dignified we become and the more appropriately we behave, the less likely we are to move and disperse that holding energy or to have a meltdown when we get hurt.
I find this fascinating because today in the schools in the United States, what's happening is children are so being taught to test. Recess has been taken away. All of the creative arts are, if not gone, incredibly limited. So there's not a lot of opportunity for any kind of movement emotionally, spiritually, through the creative arts, and, are physically in their body, and they have to contain themselves, or they're given something and told that they have ADHD. And I'm not saying that ADHD is not necessarily a real diagnosis, but I'm wondering how many children don't have that, and maybe if they just had recess and fresh air, it would change everything for them.
So true. And there are gender differences in the way boys and girls learn. And I think boys in particular suffer tremendously from being told to hold still and not touch everything.
Yeah, definitely. I want to go back to what you said that was revealed about living fascia, being filled with light.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, what might we conclude if we knew that we were a fiber optic system? There's a concept called proprioception, and that means knowing where your body is in space, knowing that you're standing upright or you're tilted sideways or your arm is over your head. And knowing that is something that is transmitted to your brain faster than any nerve impulse that they've been able to measure. That the body is instantly aware of where it is in space. And neuroscientists are now studying the role of fascia in consciousness. Is the fascial system conducting light through our body, and that is the mechanism of consciousness? Well, when I work with people on the table, you don't have to convince me, because I have been doing this for so long. I see what happens as a result of the fascial restrictions in their body being interrupted, and when they let go, it's much more than just I feel better. It has to do with an overall sense of well-being, coming back later and asking me, I had this really deep conversation with my loved one that I had been avoiding. Do you think that could be a side effect of this work? Or I cleaned out my junk drawer. And it happens often enough that I am all ready to tell someone, yes, it's definitely a side effect of the work. It's as though your body becomes intolerant of clutter, And where you had squeezed, you didn't have awareness. Things got shadowy in your ankle where you injured it. Doesn't matter if it was 20 years ago. The fascia clamped down around it to protect it. And in the moment, that's a wonderful, necessary biological reaction because it slows down blood flow and it causes numbness while it's squeezing. So that if you were to get hurt, you wouldn't bleed too much. Or if you had to fight, you wouldn't feel it right away. But eventually, that needs to stop because it can't be strangled forever. And when you are able to bring your awareness down into that area of your foot, it's as though those little light fibers unstick from each other and light can flow again, and your awareness is there for you to be able to use that area of your body. We should talk about what makes fascia sticky.
I really want to have that conversation. I mean, I know that there are physical injuries, but now you're talking about the emotional component. I'm starting to wonder as I hear you talk, because I do deep emotional work and then people will have a physical response. So it's almost like what comes first, the chicken or the egg? I mean, I guess you could approach it from both ends. You can approach it from the physical process of myofascial release as well as from the emotional aspect of doing some emotional release work as well.
I always say that the mind, the body, and the spirit are all wrapped up together, all twirled together in the same body, and you cannot separate them out.
Absolutely. I totally and 100% agree with you. That mind, body, spirit connection is a framework. And when there's imbalance in any one of those three, you really have imbalance in all three.
Yes. So, how can I explain the emotional aspect of fascia?
Well, when we return, I am going to have you do that. So please hold that thought. Everyone listening, please stay tuned. Share this show with others. People that you know need to know about this information so that they can have a much healthier life. We'll be back in just a moment.
Conscious media for conscious minds. OMTimes.
Hi, this is Angela Levesque, host of Entanglement Radio. Join me Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern for inspiring conversations with visionaries in spiritual science and conscious healing. Entanglement Radio, Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern. Transcendent talk for the conscious mind.
Meet me in the marvelous St. Martin for an evolution into self-love and soulful living. Hi, I'm Bernadette Davies, founder of Agape Holistic Retreat in St. Martin and around the globe. We're an all-inclusive retreat in St. Martin and private retreats and around the globe. It's magical. www.agapeholisticretreatsxm.com. Attunement, enhancement, alignment. www.agapeholisticretreatsxm.com. Meet you in St. Martin.
Matt Connerton here. Join Jen Coffey and I twice a week for Matt Connerton Unleashed, a political talk show that's a little different than what you're used to. No liberal or conservative agenda here, just an honest dialogue about truth and how things really work in the world of politics. Matt Connerton Unleashed, every Tuesday and Thursday night at 11 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio.
OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle. The best of the holistic, spiritual, and conscious world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
author of her brand new book, Touching Light, How to Free Your Fiber-Optic Fascia. And before we went to the break, Ronelle was sharing, she was just about to share, how does fascia get sticky? And this is a really good question to ask.
Okay. So, in addition to the concept of how it gets sticky, we're also going to describe the emotional aspect of fascial restriction. And I'm going to begin by asking your listeners, it's going to sound like I love citrus. Just imagine a lemon. Imagine in your mind's eye that you're walking through a lemon orchard and the sun is shining and you pluck a lemon from the tree and you dig your fingernail into that skin and the zest flies up and you can smell the delicious smell of lemon that's so mood lifting. And you kind of forgot that you dug your fingernail in there, and later you lick your thumb and oh boy, is that sour lemon taste is on your tongue. And while I'm describing this, listeners are salivating. Mm-hmm. And there is no lemon here. So our mind can have a thought that creates a chemical reaction in our body. So whether there is real danger or perceived danger, getting your feelings hurt, heartache, your fascia responds in a protective way by squeezing. Another great analogy is that of the cave woman versus modern woman. Cave woman used to be able to obey adrenaline. In other words, she would come around the corner, encounter a wild animal, get a huge shot of adrenaline to her psoas, the muscle for lifting the leg for fight or flight, and she would obey it. She would fight that animal, run from that animal, and in the process of all that movement, she would metabolize away the adrenaline from that moment and the lactic acid and uric acid byproduct of her muscular use. And if we could have measured her urine, we would have been able to see that she peed all of that away. Modern woman, however, is driving a car. She comes around the corner and encounters somebody pulled out in the road in front of her. She gets the same amount of adrenaline shot from her adrenal glands right to her psoas, and we're all familiar with that sickening butterfly feeling in the stomach from that happening. But the only movement that she knows she can allow is from the accelerator to the brake. Her foot just shifts from the accelerator to the brake. And she knows if she were to have an animal reaction, she would put herself and everyone else in danger. So she has to tell her body, not now. And the mechanism of not now is the fascia, whether it's emotional or physical. When you are talking to your boss and you want to cry and you tell your body, not now, your fascia tightens. But what happens is it tightens around adrenaline. So the fascia around
What do you mean
your
it tightens around adrenaline? That's a hormone, right?
Yes. Imagine that you've got that huge shot of adrenaline to your psoas, and then your body says, not now. So the saran wrap clamps down around your psoas so that you don't kick and run, and it traps the adrenaline against the surface of the muscle.
I see.
And you still have a half an hour to drive home. And by the time you get home, you either process it intellectually by saying somebody pulled out in front of me, nearly killed us all, or you don't remember that it happened. And your body is walking around with that freeze response. If you knew that it was a biological need of your body to discharge that stuck chemistry, you could excuse yourself from public scrutiny, go into your bedroom, close the door, and lie on your bed and begin to kick your heels and pound your fists, maybe scream into a pillow, not for necessarily an emotional release, but primarily for a biological cleaning out of your system to interrupt the freeze response and to get the blood flowing so that the fascia lets go and the blood can get between the layer of fascia and muscle to sweep away the lactic acid, adrenaline, and uric acid that's been marinating there ever since the event happened. And when it is uninterrupted, when the blood can't get between the layer of fascia and muscle, it gets gummy and sticky, and over time it can crystallize, and the fascia can adhere to the surface of the muscle, so that one day you try to reach for a high shelf and you get pullback from inside, something that tells you, oh, that can't be good. So you start putting things on lower shelves, limiting your range of motion, not realizing that it isn't a muscle that's the problem. It's this internal web that surrounds everything that has adhered to the surface of the muscle. But the really good news is that fascia is made of elastin and collagen, so it has the ability to stretch and melt. That's where I step in.
So let's talk a little bit about solutions. I'm glad we're going in that direction. So for those who are listening that do not have a clue about myofascial release, can you explain to them what this modality is and how it is beneficial in helping those who have this contracted issue going on with their or stickiness or their limited range of motion or even chronic pain and other things as a result of injury to the fascia?
Yes, and it's so simple, it's embarrassing.
Simple is good.
When someone comes to see me for a treatment, I like to say this ain't your mama's massage. It does not use oil because we need traction on the skin, and we need your partnership while we're working, so you're not just laying there hoping we know what we're doing. Every person, although we have the same shape, we've had different experiences, and the fascial restriction shows up in different ways. That's why when I'm working, I'll ask for feedback, and you get to be in charge. I never do anything beyond what the body is ready for, because you know you better than anybody else knows you. And if you ask me to back off, I do so immediately. There's no belief that this is good for you, and there's no room for the idea of no pain, no gain. We have had enough opportunity to prove how tough we are. On the table is the challenge to find out how soft you can be. So I'll lay my hands on someone's skin. I will push in a direction that I think that the body will give in. And if I meet resistance, I will hang out right at the resistance. I don't back off. I hang out right there with an invitation into the body to bring your attention there and see if that place is ready to soften, melt, warm, and sink. Oftentimes, when it does, to me, it feels like butter melting or pulling taffy, because it's a really slow, easy opening glide. And my hand is on the same place where I started in terms of the skin, but it shifts to a different place on the body as the skin stops adhering to the superficial layer. Another thing that I'll do is, if I notice that this body has a lot of holding in it, is I will traction. So I'll go to your feet if you're lying face up and gently lift your heels into the palms of my hands and then lean back like I'm water skiing. Not a really vigorous lean, just a really slow intention backward, which creates a sensation in your body of the opposite of gravity. Gravity's always shoving your legs up into your body. And when I do this, the body first goes into a, hey, what are you doing mode? And I can feel the resistance. But then if I hang out for 5 minutes, the body loves it. It starts to say, oh, well, hey, if you're not going to back off, let me see what I've got for you. And it starts to ease and open and shift. And it can be a really mild reaction, and it can be a dramatic reaction, because if the fascia lets go and the blood gets between the layer of fascia and muscle, it'll sweep out all of that stored, old, sticky chemistry that was sitting there. But now that chemistry is in your bloodstream, which explains why a person on the table will say, I feel like I want to cry, and that's weird, or I'm angry, or I'm remembering when I fell off a horse 30 years ago, or I am feeling this in the scar from my cesarean section.
Interesting. So then how does surgery affect fascia? And you're saying you're hanging out this very gentle process. For some people who have had surgery years ago, and they may have their body actually starting to torque as a result from the incision, is that too late for this process? Does it still work? Because it sounds very, very simple, like you're just gently gliding the surface of the skin in one direction. Is it toward the restriction or away from the restriction?
We never know. We'll start in one direction, and it's great not to know. Not go in there with my big idea of how it's going to be and how spectacular I'm going to look because I'm going to make it happen. It is something that your body allows. So I will ask questions into the body with my hands. So I'll try this direction. If I get a great big resistance, then I'll ease off and I'll try another direction. And what you were asking about how surgery affects fascia, when it repairs from being cut, it repairs like plaid, back and forth, crisscross and diagonal, and it doesn't lay down in the same direction as the muscle anymore, and it attaches to items nearby.
That's scary.
Yeah. But we can talk when we come back from the break about when is it too late.
That would be good. So there are some conditions that are not reversible, I take it, if there is a point of beautiful, wonderful. Well, everyone, you've been listening to Intuitive Transformations on OMTimes Radio. We're getting ready to go into a break. Ronelle Wood has been sharing with us her wealth of wisdom as a myofascia therapist as well as instructor. Please stay tuned because there's so much more to come. We'll be back in just a few minutes after the break.
Free your mind with OMTimes Radio, IOM FM.
Hello, I'm Miriam Knight of New Consciousness Review, inviting you to my new show where I interview the rising stars of the conscious awakening. We'll explore the many faces of consciousness in action and intriguing perspectives on life, the universe, and everything in between. Join us each Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern on the Rising Stars Show.
Meet me in the marvelous St. Martin for an evolution into self-love and soulful living. Hi, I'm Bernadette Davies, founder of Agape Holistic Retreat in St. Martin and around the globe. We're an all-inclusive retreat in St. Martin and private retreats and around the globe. It's magical. www.agapeholisticretreatsxm.com. Attunement, enhancement, alignment. www.agapeholisticretreatsxm.com. Meet you in St. Martin.
Hi everyone, this is Shay Parker, the host of Best of the Best, which airs live right here on IOM Radio every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific. I'm super excited to bring you expert guest hosts, spiritual discussions, free psychic readings, and so much more. I can promise that you will not want to miss this one-of-a-kind, fun, yet touching, down-to-earth show. Join us every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Pacific on OTR-FM. This is Shay Parker, and I can't wait to see you there.
The number one reason girls drop out of school in sub-Saharan Africa is lack of access to feminine hygiene products. The Pads for Schoolgirls Project, an outreach of Humanity Healing International, is changing this paradigm by setting up sewing programs at schools, teaching girls a vocational skill while producing the reusable pads that help keep them attending classes. The girls pay it forward by making and giving pad kits to other girls in need. To learn more, visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is. Your conscious lifestyle on steroids. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Ready. So before we continue our conversation, Ronelle, would you mind sharing with everyone how they can get in contact with you?
Certainly. You can like my page on Facebook called Touching Light. We also have a center called Ojai Healing Movement Sanctuary, OHM Sanctuary. It's also a Facebook page. And you may call us at 805-640-9111. Our website is www.ohmsanctuary.com.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. So for those individuals who are not in the Ojai, California area and they want to help themselves the best way they can, I understand that you can also learn how to do self-myofascial release. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. The quick answer to when is it too late is when fascia turns to bone.
Oh.
Over time, if fascia is left uninterrupted and repetitively tight and restricted, it will begin to ossify, but that is a long process. It takes a long time. A good example of that would be hammer toes. When you grip a lot with your toes and eventually those toes won't lay down anymore because they've turned to bone. Emphasizes how critically important it is to interrupt these fascial restrictions. You don't want to go into old age permanently stooped over and unable to stand up anymore because your fascia has ossified.
Oh, so this is what we see in some of the elderly population when they are literally bowled over, always in that constant leaning forward. That's from fascia constriction and hardening.
That's exactly right.
Fascinating.
So, if you hear what I'm saying and you say to yourself, well, I don't know of any myofascial therapists near me and I can't get to where you are, what can I do? I want to send more light over these airwaves and tell you that it is possible for you to do your own self-myofascial release. Right now, there is a young woman named Jill Miller who has come out with a treatment for fascia using yoga tune-up balls. You can find her on the internet. She wrote a book called The Roll Model because she introduces varying sizes of round balls that you can roll around on to interrupt these patterns of fascial restriction.
I want to talk about this a little bit. And first of all, I'm letting everyone know when you say roll, it's R-O-L-L, not R-O-L-E, correct?
That's exactly right.
Okay, that's what I thought. So in addition to this, foam rolling.
Very popular.
Very popular. I used to work out with a personal trainer, and one of the components of my stretching exercise was getting on that vehicle of torture. So it was all about the IT band, the iliotibia band, and that's there is this very thin, well, it's not thin, but there's a muscle that transitions into tendon on the outside of everyone's thighs, and athletes it gets very tight, all of us, when we work out. And so one of the things that is often suggested by physical therapists and personal trainers is to do some foam rolling. Now, this is different than what you're saying that Jill Miller teaches. Is that correct?
That is correct. Foam rolling is not myofascial release. Foam rolling crushes the fascia against the muscle. It doesn't displace the fascia and disconnect the adhesions. It potentially could create more. Anything that you do that causes you to brace is reinforcing fascial restriction. So on the table or on the balls, if you experience bracing, then you want to back off and go to that moment just before the bracing started. It's a magical place to find that spot where you can melt. And a good example is if you take the alpha size ball that Jill sells, and you lie on your back and you put that ball in one of your gluteal muscles, you lay there like a pencil.
That's the buttocks for some of you who don't have anatomy. But go ahead.
You said it. And you lay there like a pencil. It is normal to be annoyed at first because you start noticing just how much bracing your bottom is doing. And then you take a moment to imagine that rather than resist the ball, you imagine that you could melt over it, like it could be like pancake batter, just softening and spreading until the ball just disappears in your mind, inside of you, and you notice how much clenching you are doing. But it's wonderful that you've just interrupted that. Wherever a thought goes, blood flows.
Oh, fascinating. That's a great saying.
and you can't heal what you don't feel. So you want to bring your awareness into these areas and roll on these balls and bring more blood supply, clean out all the trash that may have accumulated between your fascia and muscle so that you don't develop patterns that eventually turn to bone.
Well, that's critically important for sure. So I also want to talk about something else you mentioned in your book, which really surprised me, and that was that we should think twice before we ice an injury, especially since ice is so heavily used in sports medicine and physical therapy, and it's what they teach in first aid. But so why do you believe that we should not rush to the ice tray when we've injured ourselves?
Well, it isn't a belief anymore. It's corroborated in the science.
Beautiful.
Many scientific studies have been done about the effect of icing on an injury, and the very doctor who coined the phrase rest, ice, compression, and elevation, called RICE, it had become a gold standard among personal trainers and in sports injury. He reversed himself. He has said, I was wrong. In fact, icing delays the healing process because it stops your body from releasing IGF-1, which is a necessary inflammation that must come to an injured area in order to heal. And the longer you ice, the more you delay that healing, and you potentially have a longer term injury. Also, when you have iced, you are numb, so you are more likely to not feel if you are overdoing it again.
Right.
And
go ahead.
The rule of thumb is if it doesn't feel good,
don't do it.
Like with the foam rolling and the ice, your fascia doesn't like it.
That makes sense. Well, it's really interesting because, as I mentioned, I went to the ER this morning, and guess what they told me to do?
Ice it.
They sure did.
Yeah.
So I'm really grateful I had your book. Something else you talk about in your book is that we can choose foods that actually feed and support our fascia.
Yeah, nutrition, very important. Totally not my area. So you'll have to read the book to read what I wrote about that in terms of the colorful foods that feed the fascia.
Also omegas, you mentioned, from fish oil. That's very important.
Absolutely, and things that support collagen production.
Wonderful. So in using the fascia self-healing process, can people actually achieve really remarkable results over time, similar to if they went to a therapist?
Yes, and when you say therapist, do you mean physical therapist?
No, myofascial release therapist.
Oh, if they do it to themselves. Got it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. It can be part of your emergency kit to have these little yoga tune-up balls on hand. For you, yesterday, when you hit your elbow,
Mm-hmm.
I think the most helpful thing would have been traction. And for that, you need someone else, anybody who could just gently hold your hand in theirs and grip lightly and lean backward, encouraging flow back through the fascia and interrupting that, dear God, we're going to die squeeze. But for those of you who get tight calves because you're out there exercising, or you've had an emotional trauma, it is a great practice to lie face down on one of the balls right in the center of you, beside your belly button where your psoas muscle is, to interrupt that grip there. Tightness in the psoas, which is your fight or flight muscle, can make you think you've got indigestion. It can make you think that there's other things wrong with you, like you have low back pain, or that
Sciatica.
Sciatica. And so that muscle in particular is really worth getting into, but you got to go real slowly with it so that you don't brace against it. And don't be embarrassed or surprised if you do work with the ball in your psoas and you cry like a baby.
Wow, that's really powerful.
It is very powerful. All the years of talk therapy I had for my very educational childhood, I didn't accomplish the same levels of physical healing
that you did through the body.
Myofascial release. It's an opportunity for your body to finally tell the truth about what happened back then when you could not have a physical reaction.
Beautiful. Ronelle Wood, thank you so much for joining us. Everyone, please go out and get her book, Touching Light, How to Free Your Fiber-Optic Fascia. There's so much more information in there. And Jill Miller, the yoga tune-up balls, the role model. I hope you've enjoyed this show. Ronelle, thank you for joining us. You've been a delight. Take care, everyone, and happy spring.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Amazon.